The email arrived on a Tuesday, marked with a little red flag. It wasn't the notification that froze Leo's blood, but the preview text. Attached the ultrasound photos, my love. Our little secret is getting so big. His hand, steady from a decade of performing intricate surgeries, trembled as he clicked. The images were a blur of grainy gray and white, but the text below was crystalline in its cruelty. It was from his wife's account, but it was addressed to Mark, his so-called friend, the man he'd helped get a job at his own hospital. The world didn't tilt, it shattered. The air in his pristine home office turned thick and foul. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was an annihilation, a meticulously planned demolition of his life, his trust, and the future he thought he was building. And in that silent, shattering moment, as he stared at the proof of his own foolishness, a cold, surgical hatred was born. Revenge would not be a crime of passion. It would be a procedure, and he would operate without anesthetic. The facade was the first incision. Leo became an actor in the tragedy of his own life. He smiled at Elena over coffee, his heart a block of ice. He listened to her talk about her day, her voice now the grating soundtrack to his internal monologue of hate. He even placed a tender hand on her still flat stomach, feeling not a spark of life, but the presence of the ultimate violation growing within her. He was a ghost in his own home, a specter of the man he used to be, all while the new, calculating version plotted in the silence. His revenge would not be against Elena. Her punishment was simpler, more profound. She would never know the man she had destroyed. She would live with the hollowed-out shell, believing her secret safe, until the precise moment he chose to reveal her ruin. No, his target was Mark. Mark, with his easy laugh and cheaper cologne. Mark, who had eaten at his table, drunk his whiskey, and now seated his wife. Leo's plan was not one of violence, but of precision. A scalpel, not a sledgehammer. He began with small, corrosive acts. He used his seniority at the hospital to subtly undermine Mark's confidence, praising him in public with faint damnation, then privately questioning his judgment on delicate cases to the chief of surgery. He planted a seed of doubt about a prescription Mark had written, suggesting a possible, though non-existent, conflict with another medication. It was a tiny mark on his record, a barely perceptible stain, but Leo collected stains. He discovered Mark's vices, a fondness for high-stakes poker and a quiet, spiraling debt. Leo, through a complex web of intermediaries, became his silent creditor. He owned the debt, then called it in at the most inopportune time, forcing Mark to sell his beloved vintage car for a fraction of its worth. Each small victory was a balm on his rage, but it was a balm that healed nothing. It only fed the infection. The emotional toll was a constant, grinding pain. He saw Mark daily, had to stand beside him in operating theaters, this man who had cuckolded him. The smell of antiseptic would mix with the phantom scent of Elena's perfume on Mark's skin, a hallucination born of pure hatred. He'd look at his own reflection in the stainless steel cabinets and see a stranger, his eyes hollow, his mouth a thin, cruel line. The pursuit of revenge was a cancer, and it was consuming him from the inside out, cell by cell. The turning point, the first crack in his icy resolve, came unexpectedly. He was leaving the hospital late, his mind buzzing with the next phase of his plan, to leak fabricated evidence of data mishandling to the medical board, when he saw Mark in the dimly lit parking lot. Mark wasn't leaving. He was sitting in his now modest sedan, his head bowed against the steering wheel, his shoulders shaking with silent, ugly sobs. He looked broken, small. A wave of triumphant fury washed over Leo. Good. Let him suffer. But as he watched, the fury receded, leaving behind something cold and unsettling. This wasn't the arrogant, swaggering predator of his imagination. This was just a weak, pathetic man, crying alone in the dark. The image refused to align with the monster Leo had been meticulously torturing. For a fleeting second, a treacherous thought whispered, "Is this enough?" He crushed it immediately. It was not enough. It would never be enough. The crying man had still destroyed him. The operation was not yet complete. Leo's masterpiece was set for the hospital's annual fundraising gala. A night of pretense and polished egos. It was the perfect stage for a very public execution. He had spent months engineering it. He'd ensured Mark would receive a prestigious award for teamwork, an accolade Leo himself had nominated him for. He had anonymously tipped off a medical journal about a groundbreaking surgical technique Mark was to present, guaranteeing a room full of press. He had even, with chilling detachment, chosen a new suit for Elena, a deep crimson that would look stunning against the pale shock he intended to deliver. He stood at the podium, the spotlight warm on his face. Below him, hundreds of the city's elite smiled up at him. Elena gazed at him with proud, loving eyes. Mark sat at a nearby table, preening, ready for his moment of glory. Leo felt a profound and terrifying calm. He began his speech, his voice smooth, praising the hospital, its values, its staff. He spoke of trust, of integrity, of the sacred bonds that hold a community together. Then he paused. The room fell silent. "We are here tonight to celebrate one such individual," he said, his eyes finding Mark's. "A man who exemplifies dedication." He clicked the small remote in his hand. The massive screen behind him, meant to show surgical breakthroughs, flickered to life. It did not show surgical tools. It showed the email, the ultrasound. The words "my love" were blown up to monstrous proportions. A collective, sharp gasp sucked the air from the room. Elena's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor like their marriage. Mark's face drained of all blood, a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. Leo didn't shout. He didn't need to. His voice was a quiet, devastating instrument, amplified in the dead silence. He read the email aloud, every damning word. He detailed the financial records, the proof of Mark's debts. He listed the professional doubts he'd seeded, revealing them now not as concerns, but as the calculated moves of a wronged man. He laid their entire sordid affair bare in front of their entire world. He didn't just expose the affair, he dissected Mark's life, his character, his very soul, and pronounced it cancerous. He turned from the shell-shocked crowd, his eyes locking finally with Mark's. There was no fight there, no defiance. Only utter ruin. The revenge was complete. It was perfect. It was everything he had dreamed of for a year. He walked out of the ballroom, the sound of rising chaos behind him. He got into his car and drove, not home, but to the empty, dark house that was no longer a home. He sat in the silence he had craved for so long. The cold fire of his hatred was gone, extinguished in that public conflagration. But in its place was not peace. It was a vast, hollow, echoing emptiness. He had devoted a year of his life, every ounce of his intelligence and passion, to this moment. He had won. He had destroyed his enemy utterly. And as he sat in the profound quiet, he understood the true cost of his victory. He had not just destroyed Mark. To build his revenge, he had dismantled himself, piece by piece, until nothing was left but the very hatred he had wielded. He had become a surgeon who had successfully removed the cancer, but in doing so, had killed the patient. The patient was him. The justice he had craved tasted only of ash. He was free of the lie, but he was a king ruling over a scorched kingdom, alone in the desolate silence of his perfect, painful revenge. Moral of the story: revenge is a surgery where the surgeon operates on himself, and the only guaranteed outcome is a terminal wound to his own soul.